All right, guys, my name is Alex. I'm talking to you from Beast Cars, New Jersey. We have a Generation 3 Mitsubishi Montero, also known as a Pajero. The truck has an issue of a leak from the water pump. So previous owner did a repair on that, and we're gonna go in there and see what's going on and what the issues are. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna drain the coolant. The way you do it is pretty easy. You go over here, there's a little bit of a little tube coming down. Coolant's gonna start coming down. All right, to make it come down quicker, we're gonna open up the radiator cap right here. So as the water is draining, we're gonna start taking off some of the parts of the intake. For that, we're gonna use 10mm socket with a wrench. Remove the intake. So for this vehicle, since it's a 4x4 off-road vehicle, the intake of the air is very high. It's right at the headlight hood line. This way when you drive through water, you're not gonna suck in water into your engine. Another important thing before you start working and touching the engine at all, you always wanna disconnect the negative cable. Now when we disconnect, we always have a rag handy. We don't wanna be spraying antifreeze everywhere. I'll put the rag underneath. Twist a few times. As it's coming out, I'm gonna make it look upwards and then twist this side. And next up, we're gonna undo these two 10mm bolts. At the same time, we can disconnect the top hose. Since most of our fluid is out already, we're not gonna spill anything. Disconnect this overflow hose from the bracket. Pull it out this way. Gives us access to the fan. The fan is connected to the fan clutch using 10mm bolts. So we're going to loosen those up. This is what they look like. Once these are off, you gotta be careful when you take it off. You don't want to bend any of the little fins in the back of the radiator. So as you pull it on, pull it off and pull it straight up. These are the 4 holes it gets attached with. In addition, there's going to be an arrow on it that usually points to the front of the vehicle. Right, front of the vehicle. This way you know how to put it back on. All right, next up, we're going to relieve the tension in our tensioner that's basically tensioning the belt. This is the drive belt, runs through all the accessories of the engine. We're going to go in here. It's a pretty easy one. It's a 1/2 inch connector right here. You basically plug it in, start relieving the tension. Notice how it loosens the belt. You loosen the belt, take it off, and bring the tension back. It's a good opportunity to examine the belt thoroughly. Make sure you bend it backwards like this. You don't see any cracks. You don't see any oily residue on it. The belt should be nice and pliable, and there should obviously be no damage in the front or the back of it. This one was recently redone, so it's a pretty new belt. We should reuse it with no issues. Next up, we're going to be taking out the fan clutch. The job of the fan clutch is based on the temperature of the engine. It's going to either stiffen up or loosen up, thus allowing the fan either to spin and draw air through or to be idle to allow the engine to warm up faster. So what you're going to do is take off these 4 10mm nuts and take it off pretty easily. We slide back the fan clutch. As you can see, this is the whole fan clutch assembly. This is what is connected to the idler pulley, and this is where it's connected to the fan. All right, next up, we're going to take off the bottom radiator hose. Notice it goes from the bottom of the radiator all the way to the housing that houses our thermostat. This is where the thermostat lives. Clip, slide it off, twist, and pull at the same time. Now, since we've been draining the water, there's not going to be anything coming out of here. Right, I like to bend it out of the way. This way when I'm working, it's not interfering me in any way. Next up, we're going to start by disconnecting the alternator. There's going to be 2 bolts holding it onto this base plate. Going to have a 14 and a 12. 14 on top, 12 on the bottom. Here's our tensioner. What I like to do is I'll take the bolts that were holding it on and keep them inserted in the right places. This way, later on, we're not confusing it with anything else. Power steering pump next, and then the AC compressor. They're held on by these 3 14mm bolts. Next up, we're going to remove the wiring that goes down to the crank sensor. All right, guys, as you remembered, we drained the coolant, we took off the fan, we took off the fan clutch. Now we're about to take off this back plate that holds all of our accessories. After disconnecting the steering pump, the AC compressor, and our alternator, we're left with a loose plate. Next step is going to be to take off the timing covers. This will show us our timing belt and all our timing components. Now we're going to give ourselves a little bit of a gap by pulling on the idler pulley, and then we're going to wiggle one of the covers out. As you can see, we got some brand new seals. Cover is in pretty good shape. These seals basically prevent from dirt entering the timing belt area and accelerating the timing belt wear. Same is going to be true here. We're going to get a little bit of space, and we're going to pull out our cover, wiggle it out, so we try not to damage it. Same thing here. Got pretty good shape seal. Looks like it's been changed pretty recently. If you find one of these with a damaged seal, you always want to replace it with something made out of neoprene or rubber. Obviously OEM seal is best, but you can probably get pretty creative with this. All right, now we're going to take this wire and make sure as we pull everything out, it doesn't get ripped or damaged. So I like to put it to the side. We're going to pull up and towards us at the same time as we wiggle. Notice how these two bolt guides would interfere with the belt and the water pump housing, but we wiggled it out, and now our job is to make sure the wire doesn't get damaged. All right, wire's off, and we're taking out the whole plate. All right, guys, now we have our timing components exposed. What we're gonna do, we're gonna take a 24mm ratchet, go onto this bolt, and start rotating the engine clockwise. This way we're going to start watching our timing marks move around. It's a good way to check if the engine is seized, if there's any issues. Also, we have a timing mark right here that's supposed to align with a timing mark that is right behind this little cover, which we don't see, but it's behind it, trust me. So as we turn, all the 3 timing marks have to align, which will tell me the engine is timed correctly and it's the top dead center. All right, looks like my side is aligned. Let's take a look over here. Yep, looks pretty aligned over here. And the same thing on the bottom. All 3 timing marks are aligned. This tells me the engine is in the right position for me to start taking off all the other components. If I do need to change the belt, I gotta do so very carefully, so as I'm changing it, none of these move. This way the engine still stays in time. What we're gonna do, we're gonna take off this large pulley, a crank pulley. This way we can expose this little cover so we can go all the way to the bottom. Since our goal is to change the water pump, as you notice it's been already changed, but it's still leaking, we probably need to reseal all the edges and see what the previous owner did. It's a pulley holder, right? As we turn, it gets tighter and holds the pulley in place, or we can take off the bolt. We'll slide it on. We insert our half ratchet, right? So we're gonna go clockwise, since we're gonna open the bolt counterclockwise. So we're gonna go against each other. We attach the 24. And basically we're fighting each other. All right, now we're gonna disconnect the big main bolt. You notice the pulley is gonna start moving. Well, got the bolt. You can also notice there's a little place for a pin. This ensures there's only one way to attach it because this guy has timing marks and it has to be a certain way to align with the timing mark on the bottom. What I'll do is I'll put it on the side, take off the bottom timing cover off, and then reattach the pulley. This way we can still use the bolt to move the engine since it's probably moved out of time. All right, so now since we have the timing belt off, we have access to the water pump, and we're taking off the water pump. There's about 5 12mm bolts, and then the rest are 10 on top. As you're doing it, you should put something underneath because the water is going to be coming out, as you can see right now. Now our job is going to be to clean both surfaces very, very well and then reseal them with RTV high temperature silicone. Taking off the thermostat housing that basically houses the water pump on the bottom, because I discovered behind the water pump housing there's another gasket that looks like it needs to be repaired. So we're going to go in a little bit deeper. This way we're gonna cover all the gaskets and make sure we got a repaired car the correct way. I have to clean this and change this. And we found there's a lot of rust, a lot of dirt, and leftovers of liquids in the back. This means our back gasket has been damaged for a bit. So now we're gonna clean all this up and order a new gasket to replace it. Okay guys, as you remember, we took apart all of our coolant components. We drained the coolant, took off the fan, took off the plate, took off the accessory belt. We took off everything. This is the water pump we took off. One of our gaskets, namely right here, is the reason we were leaking all the coolant. Notice how there's rubber pieces missing. What we're gonna do, we're gonna replace the gasket with this one, reinforce it with some silicone, and the water pump is going to be also reinforced with silicone. We're going to give it about an hour to dry, and then we're going to reinstall everything. Alright, so now we put everything on silicone with new gaskets. We tighten it very loosely, just enough to make contact and get a little bit of pressure. We're going to wait about 15-20 minutes, let the silicone harden a little bit, and then we're going to tighten it to spec. Now silicone is dry, we tighten it up a little bit. Don't go too crazy because then you're basically going to make it too small and it's going to leak again. Now we're going to put back everything as it was. When we fill up the car with new fresh antifreeze, we have to make sure these two drain plugs are open. If we keep them closed, we're going to have bubbles in the system. If we keep them open, as the system gets filled up, this is the top parts of the system. So all the air is going to be escaping through these two holes. Montero specifically has these. Some cars nowadays have systems designed to let the air escape. This one is a little bit more old school, so this is our only way to let the air escape the system and not have any air bubbles. All right guys, so tools needed for the job. Obviously you're gonna need a ratcheting wrench, 3/8 and 1/4. I also use a half, so I got all three styles, right? Then we're gonna have our sockets. We're gonna have a 10, 12, 14, and 17. We also have some short ones because some clearance areas we need a little bit shorter. You got a 10, you got a 12, and you got a 14. At the same time, we got a 10, take off some of the really tight areas. We got a 24, that's for the main crank bolt. We got some extensions for different thicknesses. We got a flat screwdriver. We got another flat screwdriver. We got a scraper. This is a gasket scraper. We got a breaker bar to take the tension off from the belts. We got a pretty large torque wrench that I use to tighten up or loosen up the crank bolt. We got a little bit of magnetic storage. This way we can put all the bolts and not lose them. On this side, we got a tool to hold the pulley. It's a pulley holder used in conjunction with a half wrench. We got a flashlight. It's a magnetic base, very useful. And my favorite thing is the Sharpie. It's an oil-based Sharpie. I use it to mark different places, different things, different items that I take off and put it back on. Makes my life a lot easier.